Let's turn to that case at The Hague right now. South Africa has brought charges of genocide. And this, just to be clear with people, that this is sort of almost like a preliminary injunction part of this case, where South Africa is suggesting that there is enough indication that Israel is pursuing genocide, that the ICJ should rule that it is in favor of Israel stopping, essentially. Right. But here is South African lawyer Ronald Lamola in basically presenting Israeli statements as proof of the genocidal intent of the Israeli government, and pointing to that sort of the way that Netanyahu's referencing Amalek from the Bible as an indication of sort of how this information is flowing through, because of course no government says our intent is genocide, at least not these days. And here is Lamola.
Command of the state. They communicated state policy. It is simple. If the statements were not intended, they would not have been made. The genocidal intent behind these statements is not ambiguous to the Israeli soldiers on the ground. Indeed, it is directing their actions and objectives. On 7 December 2023, Israeli soldiers proved that they understood the Prime Minister's message to remember what the Amalek has done to you as genocidal. They were recorded by journalists dancing and singing. We know our motto, there are no uninvolved, that they obey one commandment, to wipe off the seed of Amalek. The Prime Minister's invocation of Amalek is being used by soldiers to justify the killing of civilians, including children. These are the soldiers repeating the inciting words of their Prime Minister.
I'll read these. It's being sung in Hebrew. I'm coming to occupy Gaza and beat Hezbollah. I stick by one mitzvah, to wipe off the seed of Amalek. I left home behind me. Won't come back until victory. We know our slogan. There are no uninvolved civilians. I mean, that's pretty compelling argument that Netanyahu says, cites their duty relative to the biblical sort of story of Amalek, and Israeli soldiers are, and not every Israeli soldier obviously caught on video, but certainly these Israeli soldiers both repeat the citation of Amalek, which is where you must annihilate all of their seed, and literally saying it's our slogan. Like, we know our mantra. There are no uninvolved civilians. And yet, when we watch CNN, we'll see spokesperson after spokesperson says no one takes the care with civilians like we do.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's all incredibly perverse. Honestly, in the very early weeks of the conflict back in October, I see statements from Israeli officials or people in Israeli society, saying things like, oh, there are no innocent civilians, they need to be punished to a point where they don't want to back Hamas anymore, and that will involve curbing their resources and denying them food and all these kinds of things. Like, I initially assumed a lot of those were like mistranslations. Like, surely they were not being that explicit about the language and logic of collective punishment. But they weren't, you know, I mean, we've heard over and over and over again now, these overt statements blaming everybody in Gaza for what happened on October 7th, suggesting that because of an election years and years and years ago, a Palestinian election years and years and years ago, that Hamas won, well, that sort of means that Hamas has enjoyed the support for all of the actions they've undertaken since then by the entirety of the Palestinian community. We see all these efforts to sort of to collapse and erase the distinction between, you know, an innocent civilian and the combatants, that I think, you know, point to real eliminationist intent here. And I think a lot of the Israeli cases rested on the idea of the Holocaust being definitional, in that a genocide is when you are actively trying to eliminate every single person who belongs to an ethnic group or a religious group, as was the case in the Holocaust. And that's not necessarily, you know, what genocides mean. All that you have to do to demonstrate genocide, as far as I understand it, as a matter of international law, is that you are targeting a group of people on the basis of their identity with elimination intent. Even if you don't actually succeed or try to eliminate all of them, you are basically denying their humanity, and engaged in a concentrated attack on their community. And I don't think that there is a way to read what we're seeing right now happening in Gaza as being anything but that. Especially, you know, as we're hearing more and more about this idea of shoving everybody over the border into Egypt, this idea that Gaza will only be stabilized with a kind of mass removal of the population. We're hearing, I think, IDF soldiers and other people in Israeli society talking about resettling the area. You know, this is all. It doesn't really get more.
It's textbook.
Blatant,
it's textbook. Yeah,
it's pretty straightforward.
Germany has joined as a third party in South Africa's case against Israel to defend Israel. To your point about obviously the deep generational wounds of the Holocaust here, the idea that Germany feels that it's appropriate in any way for them to like weigh in at all. I mean, honestly, they should be recusing themselves in this instance, but they are coming to the defense of Israel here in a fairly unprecedented way. Everything you're saying, paired also with Netanyahu kind of scrambling and making a speech in English the day before the proceedings began to say that they have no intention of permanently occupying Gaza and ethnically cleansing Palestinians. I mean, I don't know if they're the fact that they're even engaging in the defense when they previously boycotted these kinds of proceedings for decades indicates to me that they might be a little bit worried.
Yeah, as they should be. I mean, this has been a tremendous disaster for Israel's image. I think that all of the tumult in American politics right now is a real shift. The idea that, you know, you cannot expect defense from every portion of American society for whatever Israel does from here on out is, I think, a tremendous change. You know, as much as the administration is trying to hold the old alliance together, I think that more and more Americans are really disturbed by what they're seeing, and I think that the trial is only going to deepen that as it continues. I don't think we're going to expect a real ruling on this for possibly for many years, but if, you know, in these preliminary proceedings, the fact that we've been having them in the first place and entertaining this question, I think, is going to be a real blow to the Israeli image, and I think it'll probably have a lasting effect, and hopefully it'll apply more pressure and be more of an inducement to wind things down in Gaza.
Yeah. Lastly, I want to play this one clip too. The sort of like knock-on damage that this is doing to the Biden administration credibility, to U.S. credibility. I mean, you know, and I'm not talking about mine personally, credibility with me. I'm talking like even in sort of like a broader, sort of more diplomatic circles. It really seems farcical and just bizarre at this point. This is John Kirby having to answer the question. And what's fascinating about this is there's no refutation. This is simply just sort of like almost like a category question. He is asked by, and do we know the name of this reporter? He's asked by a reporter, we'll get her name in just a moment, whether cutting off Palestinians' access to water and food is in and of itself a war crime. And this is Kirby's response.
As you know, you dismissed a few days ago the case that brought by South Africa against Israel at the ICJ. Did you read the indictment? And if you did, do you believe that cutting off water, electricity, and fuel on a civilian population does not constitute a war crime by itself, nothing else?
Yes, I read the indictment, and as I said, and we stand by what we said about this. We find it without merit, and we find it counterproductive, and I'll leave it there.
I mean, so he can't even answer that fundamental question. That seems to be really problematic. If the U.S. government now is incapable of even answering that question as a general manner.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not a good position to be in. I saw somebody writing, I think it was earlier today, this argument that, well, you know, Israel might be committing war crimes, but war crimes are not necessarily genocide. And to me, if that's the argument you're having, if that's where the debate is, you've basically lost. Yeah. I mean, there's no, you know, that's not where you want to be. And it's not where we want to be as a country. You know, having split hairs in that particular way, it should be clear. And I think it is clear to most people that at the very, very, very least, the Palestinian people in Gaza are being put through something without recent precedent in modern warfare, both in terms of the intensity of the bombing, you know, in terms of the indiscriminate nature of it, how packed in they are. I mean, it was clear at the very outset. When we think about the density of Gaza and the 2 million people who live there, I think half of them are children, that this was going to be something horrific and indefensible, and something that was not going to be, you know, conducive to you know, establishing a lasting peace in the region and addressing the root causes of what happened on October 7th. Everybody knew that. And what we've gone through, as if we've watched it happen in the last couple of months, are these different stages of denial and petulance on the part of the administration. And Kirby in particular, I think, has been very kind of dismissive and haughty about all of this in his statements. I don't know if he's well suited to being a spokesperson anywhere. But you know, if all the administration can do and all Israel can do is, you know, deny or reject the premise of these questions without attending to the realities of what's going on the ground, without returning to the realities of what the Israeli officials have said, it's a real shame, and I think it ultimately does hurt the administration in a narrow political sense that I don't think they fully appreciate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is really, I think there's just an amazing amount of hubris, but also incompetence and bizarre ideology. I think that's driving this thing, and that is, I find, even from the most cynical of lenses, to be sort of shocking. Osita Nwanevu, thanks so much for your time today. We will put links to your, well, actually, the best place for you is OsitaNwanevu.com, because you can see all of your writing. You send people to your Guardian and New Republic pieces, so we will link to that. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.